Okie dokie. Okay, well, everyone, welcome to the New York Map Society's May meeting. We're happy to have Chet Van Duzer speaking today. Andrew will do the introduction in a moment. I know it's a nice day today, so we may have many people in New York out and about enjoying the weather. So thank you for those of you that were able to join us today. Just a quick couple announcements. We are sort of nearing the end of our program year, in effect. Not really our program year. We typically take a pause in the summer. Our program year actually runs January through December now. However, we are gonna have a society election in September. What we'll do is we'll send out nomination forms so people can actually nominate or I guess apply for positions on the in the society, and the election will happen sometime in September. Andrew, do you want to talk about any upcoming events or?
Sure. I want to talk about next month's first. It's going to be Saturday, June 12th at 2 p.m. And the summary is not on our website, which is under reconstruction. It's at John Doctor's Cartographic Calendar. And we're going to have historian Lindsay Frederick Braun from Rutgers, University of Oregon, and the Netherlands Institute for Advanced Study. It's going to be speaking on cartographic authorities and compilation networks in 19th century South Africa. So his work over the last decade and a half has involved surveying, mapping, and struggles over land and landscape in South Africa between the middle of the 19th century and the First World War. So we're all looking for that. He's looking primarily of the two Boer republics, the Orange Free State and the South African Republic or Transvaal, and divergences between the illusion of precision and the cartographic ideal of accuracy. So it'll be the same Zoom link, and I'll be sending that out both at the end of the month and roughly a week before that session. But today, we are so proud to have New York Map Society member and someone for whom the phrase, he needs no introduction is to a cartographic audience is certainly true. Chet Van Duzer, a historian, a prolific author, a researcher on it seems like every possible topic, and they always turn out to be supremely interesting. He's going to be talking today about shipwrecks, treasure, and maps at the end of the 17th century, the manuscript atlases of William Hack. So, Chet, take it away. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Andrew, for the generous introduction. I'll just go ahead and share my screen here. And is that coming through well?
Looks good to me.
Okay. So here we go. Yes, shipwrecks, treasure, and maps at the end of the 17th century, the changes in the manuscript atlases of William Hack. So I'll just begin with one image of a map in one of William Hack's beautiful manuscript atlases, which we see here. This is his atlas in Greenwich at the National Maritime Museum. There are several copies, several manuscript copies of his atlases at libraries in England and North America. As you can see, they are spectacularly beautiful. They cover the Pacific coasts of the Americas from Mexico south to the southern tip of South America. And we know very little about William Hack. He flourished from 1671 to 1702, which is to say that's when he was most active. There's no surviving portrait of him. He made elaborate manuscript charts like the one we just saw. He was in fact the most productive member of the so-called Thames School of Cartography by far, if one tabulates the number of maps made by the cartographers of that school. The numbers for William Hack are by far the largest. And so even though most of his work was devoted to manuscript charts, he was also had a presence in the world of print and edited a book titled A Collection of Original Voyages in 1699. So part of this talk relates to shipwrecks and the idea of recovery of treasure and cannon from shipwrecks. And I think normally when we think about recovering material from shipwrecks, we think about the 19th, 20th, and 21st centuries, and the idea that it was possible to recover things from shipwrecks in the 16th and 17th century seems remote and questionable. So I'm going to begin by a look at some early equipment and methods for salvaging shipwrecks, so that when we come around to looking at indications of shipwrecks in Hack's atlases, I will be able to suggest that those indications were there to suggest the possibility of recovery. So here we have a page from Girolamo Cardano's De Subtilitate Libri, 21 books, De Subtilitate from 1550. And if we zoom in on this diagram, this is a method for raising a sunken ship using the buoyant force of 5 other ships. And the text says, when ships sink in a channel and there is a plan to pull them up, skiffs laden with rocks are tied to the vessel with ropes by divers in such a way that the ropes are as taut as possible. Then rocks extracted from these skiffs are unloaded into a similar number of empty skiffs, with the result that the skiffs that are emptied out pull the vessel up gradually from the depths along with themselves. So you weigh the skiffs down with rocks, divers tie them to the sunken ship, you take the rocks off, and then the buoyant force of the skiffs raises the ship. This is a diagram from Niccolò Tartaglia's general rule to raise any ships and boats with explanation, printed in Venice in 1562. And the idea here is that we have the sunken ship between 2 undamaged ships, and a framework is built between them, and that is used to raise the sunken ship. So here we have another view, and we can see here the ropes that have been tied underneath the sunken ship, and then the buoyancy of the 2 undamaged ships can be used to raise the sunken ship between them. The same book contains an image of a diving bell, which we see here. I think it's fair to say that this is not a very realistic image of a diving bell. We'll see a more realistic image shortly. But the idea of having a method that would allow humans to breathe underwater was certainly current in the 16th century. This is such a method in Battista della Valle's book on military technologies, which was first printed in 1521. This copy is from 1558, and we can see here an illustration of a method for breathing underwater, and this could be used by divers in recovering material from sunken ships. This is a book by Diego Ufano, printed in 1621. It has a section titled How to Raise a Sunken Ship with Its Artillery and Everything in the Water. So the book's title is Artillery, and artillery, cannon, were so valuable that it was worth the trouble to try and raise cannon from sunken ships. And so in a book about artillery, one important thing to address is how to recover artillery from sunken ships. And we can see that the method he's proposing is similar. One places undamaged ships on either side of the sunken ship and uses ropes to try and raise it. And in the same book, we have this marvelous illustration of raising recovering a cannon from a sunken ship. So we can see that the diver, with his breathing apparatus, is hooking anchors or hooks onto the cannon. And then there's a device supported by two boats to raise the cannon slowly without expending a tremendous amount of energy. This is from a manuscript by a Spanish writer, Pedro de Ledesma, about fishing for pearls and looking for galleons. It's a manuscript from 1623 in the Naval Museum in Madrid. And the text that accompanies this illustration says, "Another way and safe invention for one or two or more people to go down to the bottom of the sea where there are 16 to 25 fathoms of water and be there 3 and 4 hours." So it's a breathing apparatus that allows a diver to stay down between 3 and 4 hours. Another diagram from the same manuscript, which shows a way to search in any part of the sea from 100 fathoms deep or more to 2 or 3 fathoms for any ship that is lost in a wide area. And in the text at the left-hand side of the page here, the author says, "I made this invention in 1623 in the 2 islets of Matacumbe to find the plans of the 2 galleons with the silver, the Margarita and the galleon of Don Pedro Pasquier. I found the first in 3 arms of water." And the method he's illustrating here is having 2 ships drag a chain along the bottom, and hopefully that will catch the sunken ship. This illustration in the same manuscript is titled "Way of Grabbing the Galleon with Chains Once Found at the Bottom of the Sea." Oops. And we can see that a series of anchors has been fixed to the ship. And then we have another way to search for any lost ship or galleon in an area where there are rocks and an uneven bottom, deep and shallow, and reefs that can interfere with the chain. So he's suggesting a method different from dragging a chain on the bottom when the bottom of the sea is uneven. And as we can see here, he's suggesting that the 2 ships pull a large plank, and from that plank are hanging numerous anchors. And the idea is that those anchors would get hook in the sunken ship at the bottom, as we see here. And then this illustration, the text, accompanying text says, "Another way of artifice and instrument to know the bottom of the sea after being moored and seizing whatever ship or galleon is there." And we have 2 divers who are fixing anchors to the sunken ship. And then we see there's a machine on the ship for raising the ship up once the anchors have been fixed to it. And another very similar illustration, when a ship or galleon has been found at the bottom of the sea, a way to be able to raise it with strong instruments and with ease. And again, we have the anchors being fixed to the wreck and the machine for raising the ship here. And one final illustration from George Sinclair's book, The Hydrostatics, from 1672. So here we're approaching the time period of the Hack atlases, and we can see this illustration of a diving bell. And in fact, Sinclair had experimented with a lead diving bell in Tobermory Bay on the Isle of Mull in 1664 to recover cannons from a shipwreck from the Spanish Armada. So the diving bell we saw illustrated before was rather hypothetical, let's say, rather theoretical, whereas this one shows a diving bell that was actually in use. So all of this by way of showing that it was indeed possible in the 16th and 17th centuries to recover treasure and cannons from sunken ships. Returning to Hack's atlases, he copied them from a derrotero, or book of sailing directions, captured from the Spanish. So I'm going to talk about the derrotero that was captured and where and when that happened. So it happened in the taking of the Spanish ship Rosario by the English privateer Bartholomew Sharp in July of 1681. And here is a map showing Bartholomew Sharp's course around South America. The map was made by Basil Ringrose in 1685. First, Sharp went marauding up the western coast of South America and then sailed back around the continent to the Caribbean. And it was in this region where Sharp took the Rosario, and now I'm going to give the account of that feat in his own words. This day, about 6 o'clock in the morning, we spied a sail, and I gave chase, and about 8 o'clock at night I took her. She came from Guayaquil and was bound to Panama. Her cargo for the most part was silver and cocoa, and in her I found a parcel of manuscripts in Spanish, of maps and writings of untold value, for it plainly shows all the ports, bays, roads, harbors, creeks, rivers, plantations, towns, settlements, soundings, shoals, sands, rocks, islands, sea cliffs, dangers, products, trade, where to find wood, water, and in all sorts of provisions, where to build or refit a ship, where to find mines, sugar, brandy, oil, etc., and directions how to sail a ship into any of their harbors, and the true distance of the mines of silver and bearings from Arica in Peru. They were going to throw them, that is the maps, overboard, but my men prevented it, which made the Spanish captain cry out in Spanish, "Farewell, South Sea." And truly by the help of these manuscripts, navigation in the South Seas is made practicable. And of course, the South Sea is the Pacific. So why is it that the Spanish captain cries out, "Farewell, South Sea"? He cries out because he realizes that the English have captured this enormously valuable atlas of sailing directions along the whole Pacific coast of the New World, from Mexico south to the southern tip of South America. So he believes that now that the English have captured this atlas, they will be able to operate in the Pacific with great proficiency, and thus that the Spanish will lose the share of control they had exercised in the Pacific to this point. And the long list that Sharp gives of everything the atlas is a guide to is a great indicator of the richness of the atlas, and again reinforces this idea that with this atlas you can do what you want in the Pacific. So what does one of these Spanish derroteros look like? Well, we don't have, or we don't think we have, the derrotero that was actually captured by Sharp, but this is the opening, from a Spanish derrotero made in 1677 in the Naval Museum in Madrid, and it is one of the maps. So it shows part of the Pacific coast of the New World, and as we can see, it's very detailed. First, it's at a large scale, and we can see that it has a lot of descriptive details, and these are details about how to sail into this port, where to anchor, what goods can be obtained there. Another opening from the same manuscript, again, we see this very detailed image of the coast, piece by piece, working from north to south, with all sorts of practical details about navigating along this coast and the practical details of how to survive there in a ship. So as I said, Basil Ringrose captured a Spanish derrotero like the one we just saw. The derrotero was taken to London and was copied by William Hack. And so we'll get now a bit of a look at Hack's atlases, a little bit of an idea of what they're all about. Here's the authorship page on one of Hack's atlases. This one's from 1683 in the Free Library of Philadelphia. It's very colorful and appealing. At the same time, I think we can recognize that the level of the non-cartographic artistry is not all that high. Here's the dedication page on the same atlas by Hack in the Free Library of Philadelphia. So these are luxury manuscripts intended for an audience of nobles. And here's the index map in Hack's Atlas of 1685 at the National Maritime Museum in Greenwich. And just to orient ourselves, so again, it shows the whole Pacific coast of the New World from Mexico south. So here's Acapulco, Panama, Guayaquil in Ecuador, Lima, Valdivia in Chile, and the Strait of Magellan. And just to show a few more maps from Hack's atlases to give an idea of their high artistic quality and the fact that, again, these were luxury productions intended for nobles. So map of port of Hualtuco in Mexico in the manuscript in the Free Library of Philadelphia. Realejo in Nicaragua. Again, we can see the detailed notes. Map of a town in Peru in his atlas in Greenwich. And I want to point out that there is some evolution in Hack's atlases. So here's the map of the Strait of Magellan in Hack's atlas at the Huntington Library in Southern California. It takes a moment to orient oneself, but in this case, we have the map is oriented with north to the left, and I've indicated the strait. We can see that this is not a very detailed or accurate map at all and would not be of much help in actually navigating the Strait of Magellan. But Hack later found a much better model for his map of the Strait of Magellan, and in later manuscripts, he includes this much more detailed and much more accurate map of the strait, and I've again indicated the strait here. So again, just to make the point that there was some evolution in Hack's atlases over time. And finally, an image, a map of the Isle of Juan Fernandez in the Pacific. And again, we can see the rich color, which points up the fact that these are luxury productions intended for English nobles. So Hack's atlases contain information about shipwrecks, and I want to point out that the Spanish derroteros, like the one that Hack's atlas was based on, also have information about shipwrecks. So we begin by looking at the information about shipwrecks in the Spanish derroteros that are similar to Hack's model. So this is a derrotero in the London Society of Antiquaries, manuscript 221. The map of the Gulf of Vayona in Panama. And we have here this indication that in these shallows, the Almirante del Rey was lost in the year 1631. So a record of a shipwreck from the year 1631. Looking at another Spanish derrotero, this one in the Naval Museum in Madrid, the map of the Estero Cojimies in Ecuador. The text here says, in these shallows of the Cajama River, Domingo Antonio, pilot of the ship of Felipe Alonso Beltran, was lost going to turn close to land in 1612. Let this serve as a warning. So let the fact that a ship was lost here remind us that these are dangerous waters, that this particular location is hazardous. The same manuscript in the Naval Museum. This is the bay by the Rio de Sanya in Peru. And the text here says, in these shallows of the Sanya River, Fernando Gallegos with the ship San Diego of Captain Melchor de Segura, coming from New Spain in 1599, was lost. This will serve as a warning. So again, an indication of a shipwreck, and its function on the map and in the manuscript is to serve as a warning that this is a dangerous spot. Another Spanish derrotero, this one in the National Library of Spain. This is the same bay, the bay by the Rio de Sanya in Peru. And the text here says, in these shallows, Fernando Gallegos was lost with the ship San Diego in 1599. So very similar information without this, in this case, the warning, but basically the same information in the same location in a different Spanish derrotero. So let's have a look at the shipwrecks in the atlases of William Hack. So given that Hack's atlases are based on this Spanish derrotero, we would expect that he would have copied the information about shipwrecks. So let's have a look. We'll begin with Garachine in Panama, and we'll look at the Hack's map of this area in a few different manuscripts. So this is the map of this part of Panama in Hack's Atlas of 1683 in the Free Library of Philadelphia. And he says, on this shoal, the Almirante of the King of Spain was lost in the year 1631. So basically exactly the same information that we had in the Spanish derroteros. His atlas in Greenwich, the map of the same region. On this shoal was lost the Almirante of the King of Spain in the year 1631. The same information. This is the map of the same region in the atlas in the John Carter Brown Library. And we read here, on this shoal was lost the Almirante of the King of Spain in the year 1631. In her was a vast treasure. This is something very different, an indication that this is a valuable wreck. This information does not appear in any of the Spanish derroteros that I have consulted. And it's now here, instead of serving as a warning, instead of the shipwreck serving as a warning, it's presented as an opportunity. As we saw, the technology for recovering material from shipwrecks existed at this time. And Hack's reference to the vast treasure in this shipwreck is declaring that this is just such an opportunity. Looking at the map in the Clements Library Atlas of the same region, here it says, on this shoal was lost the Almirante of the King of Spain in the year 1631, in which was abundance of treasure. So again, an indication of the treasure potentially available for recovery in this shipwreck. The Hack Atlas in the Bancroft Library at UC Berkeley, again, the map of this same region. And Hack writes, on this bank was the Almirante of the King of Spain lost in the year 1631. The ship was lost in her voyage from Panama to Lima, and in her was great treasure. I mean from Lima to Panama. So he made a mistake saying from Panama to Lima. He corrects himself at the end and says from Lima to Panama. But the important thing here for our purposes is that, again, we have this indication that there was a great deal of treasure in this shipwreck. Moving on to another map of Colanche, Ecuador, in Hack's Atlases. Here's the map in the Free Library of Philadelphia manuscript. Here's the Isle of Colanche, which with no mention of a shipwreck in this case. Here's the Clements Library Atlas, the map of the same area. And the text says, the rock of Colanche, on which was cast away in the year 1644, a vast rich ship designed for England to relieve King Charles I. So it's quite remarkable, that last bit about the ship being intended for England to relieve King Charles I. I'll set that to the side for the moment. But the important thing here is that it's declared to have been a vast, rich ship. So again, an indication of the possibility of recovering treasure from the ship. The map of Calanche in the atlas in the John Carter Brown Library. We'll zoom in here. And the text says, "The rock of Calanche, on which was cast away in the year 1644 a very rich ship, having many millions of money on board and several copper guns." So this is an additional level of detail. So specifying that there are millions of pounds, presumably, of money on board and several copper guns. So the shipwreck is definitely being presented here as an opportunity for recovery. The manuscript in the Huntington Library, this text by the Rock of Calanche says, "Rock of Calanche, on which was cast away in the year 1644 a very rich ship having many millions of money on board and several copper guns." So very similar to what we have on the atlas in the John Carter Brown Library. The manuscript in the Bancroft Library. Here we have the Rock of Calanche, and up above, we have this rather long text, and it says, "North-northeast 8 leagues distant from the point of St. Helena lies a high rock called Calanche, which to windward runneth shoaling for the space of half a mile, and lies 2 leagues from the main. On this rock was cast away in the year 1644 a very rich ship, having then on board 15 million of pieces of 8 and 70 pieces of brass ordnance, and lies in about 7 fathom of water." So this is even more specific information and really an invitation to recover this ship. So 15 million pieces of 8 and 70 pieces of brass ordnance, and it lies in about 7 fathom of water. So even an indication of how difficult it would be to recover the treasure from the ship. So one has the luxury of calculating whether it's worth, 15 million pieces of 8 and 70 pieces of brass ordnance. Is that worth trying to mount the effort to recover something, a shipwreck that's in 7 fathoms of water? So in this case, it's particularly clear that the shipwreck is being presented as an opportunity. Look at Hack's maps of Manta, Ecuador. The atlas in the National Maritime Museum. No indication of shipwreck or treasure here. Clements Library atlas from 1698. And we have this notation, a wreck in which was millions of reals of plate when lost. And the map from the Huntington manuscript. In this ship was 50 millions of royals and 37 pieces of ordnance, and on the same rocks has been lost many more ships. So again, an indication of the amount of treasure and valuable cannons waiting for possible recovery. And in this case, there's also the hint that other ships have been lost on the same rock, so there's a possibility of finding other wrecks. So what is the pattern? Well, why is it that in some cases Hack includes information about the treasure that was on the wrecked ships, and in other cases he does not? Well, the pattern is that the earlier atlases do not include references to treasure, and the later ones do. What could have caused this change? Why is it that Hack would have added at some point this information about the treasure that was available in these shipwrecks? I will suggest that Hack was inspired to add information about treasure by a spectacular recovery of treasure from a Spanish shipwreck in the Caribbean by William Phipps in 1687. So here's a portrait of Phipps, who lived from 1651 to 1695. He was of humble birth in Maine. He became a ship captain. He was famous for recovering treasure from the Spanish wreck I just mentioned in 1687, and was later appointed governor of the Massachusetts Bay Colony in 1691. This is Christopher Monk, the second Duke of Albemarle, who lived from 1653 to 1688. He's been called a man of little ability or character. Nonetheless, beginning in 1682, he was Chancellor of the University of Cambridge, and from 1687 was the governor of Jamaica. And it was Albemarle who funded Phipps's voyage to the Caribbean in 1686 to recover treasure from a Spanish shipwreck. And thanks to Phipps's success, Albemarle became, quote, the most successful treasure seeker in English history. And what that means is that in terms of the ratio between the amount of money he invested and the amount he got back as a result of Phipps's success was the best in English history. And when Phipps returned to London with this huge treasure, it caused a sensation. And just to show the location of the wreck on Mull's map of the West Indies from 1709. So just to orient ourselves, here's Cuba and Hispaniola. Here's the location of the treasure wreck. And we see this textual indication on the map. Here, Sir William Phipps brought up a vast quantity of silver from a Spanish wreck in 1685. So a little mistake about the year, but this map shows that this recovery by Phipps, recovery of treasure by Phipps was so famous that years later, it was still being indicated on maps, the location of the wreck. This is a new sheet that announced Phipps' recovery of the treasure. And it's by Phipps and entitled An Exact and Perfect Relation of the Arrival of the Ship, the James and Mary, Captain Phipps, commander, with 200,000 pounds in gold and silver taken up in 9-fathom water from the bottom of the sea, being a supposed wreck of a Spanish galleon cast away above 43 years ago among the Bahama Islands, and printed the same year that Phipps returned to London with this prize. And just quote from part of this account, but Albemarle left order that none go ashore till the ship is unladen of her cargo, being actually 26 tons and 700 pounds weight of silver, 15 tons thereof being pieces of 8, 2 bars or ingots of gold, 17 pounds weight, 6 brass cannon of 30 weight each, being as serviceable as at first, which amount to in the whole to above 200,000 pounds. So a spectacular recovery of treasure that again caused a sensation. And part of that sensation was the creation of medals to commemorate the recovery. So this medal has a portrait of Albemarle, and the Latin phrase on the reverse says, "From the sea comes everything." And another medal has portraits of James II and Mary, and the Latin phrase says, "Always let your hook hang down." And in this case, we have another Latin phrase that mentions that what's being commemorated here is the shipwreck that was discovered. And we have this little image, sort of idealized image of sailors working to recover the shipwreck. So we can see the ribs of the shipwreck on the bottom, and they're pulling up a rope. So again, a very idealized image of the recovery of a shipwreck, but nonetheless, the creation of this medal demonstrates the tremendous excitement that Phipps' successful recovery of treasure caused. When I was working on this project, I thought it would be fun to try and find some images of the actual coins recovered from the shipwreck by Phipps. The best I could do was this illustration in Hans Sloane's A Voyage to the Islands, printed in 1707, so 20 years after Phipps' recovery. And we have here these three images of coins found in the shipwreck with coral growing on them. So again, 20 years later, the shipwreck had this hold on the imagination of the English people. So it seems likely that it was news of Phipps' success that inspired Hack to add information about treasure to his maps. But how can we be sure? How can we be sure that that was the event that caused this? Well, there was a close connection between Albemarle and Hack. And again, it was Albemarle who had sponsored Phipps' voyage and benefited from it financially. Albemarle was one of Hack's early patrons, and Hack dedicated one of his atlases to Albemarle. He also dedicated this map of Port Royal, Jamaica, to Albemarle in 1683. But even if we didn't have good evidence of the fact that Albemarle was a patron of Hack's and that there was this connection between them, Hack was very well informed about Phipps' recovery of the treasure and made a map showing the location of the Spanish wreck in 1687, the same year that Phipps returned to London. So here is that map titled A Description of the Bahama Banks, originally taken by Mr. Charles Salmon under the command of Captain Phipps. So was in communication and obtained a map from someone who had been on the voyage. And looking at some of the details of the map, so the plate wreck is indicated here, meaning the Spanish wreck with lots of silver. Copper wreck, another shipwreck, is indicated here. Here is good roading or anchoring in smooth water when you are forced from the wreck by a strong northwest wind. And here is good anchoring and smoother water than is on the wreck. So suggesting a place that the ship could anchor if it got rough where the wreck was located. So again, the fact that Hack made this map indicates that he was as fully informed as anyone about Phipps' success. He was in communication and obtained a map from one of the people who had been on the voyage. So this helps confirm that it was Phipps' recovery of treasure that inspired Hack to add information about shipwrecks to his atlases. So thus, inspired by Phipps' treasure recovery, Hack repurposed, or rather additionally purposed, his atlases as guides for the recovery of treasure from Spanish wrecks. So by adding information about shipwrecks, and well, the information about shipwrecks themselves was there, as we saw in his Spanish model, in the Spanish derrotero, but by adding information about treasure, he added a new level of value to his atlases. So in addition to being guides for navigation, they were now also guides to sites where treasure could be recovered from Spanish wrecks. And remarkably, in at least one contemporary case, one of his atlases was accorded a much higher valuation because of this new purpose. That is, this new function of his atlases as guides to treasure, and the resultant increase in value of the atlases was quickly recognized. So this is a portrait of Nicolaas Witsen. It was a statesman and mayor of Amsterdam and an administrator of the Dutch East India Company. And he was a cartographer and expert on Russia. And just as a side note, we'll take a quick look at his map published in 1687, whose title translates as New Land Map of the Northeastern part of Asia and Europe, extending from Nova Zembla to China. And just to orient ourselves, here's the Caspian Sea and the Great Wall of China. So Witsen himself was a cartographer. Naturally, this entailed that he had a substantial library of maps and books of geography, and he owned one of Hack's atlases. And the atlas that he owned is now in the Bancroft Library at the University of California, Berkeley. It's manuscript 224, and Whitson tipped this letter into the atlas. And I should mention that the Bancroft Library Atlas does include indications of treasure. So, quoting from the letter, I had collected between 200 and 300 maps, of which, as far as I know, nobody had duplicates. All were drawn very preciously, and one could clearly see many places in the South Sea where ships were sunk, loaded with silver and gold, which would be easy to recover, and up till now had been neglected by the Spaniards. Those maps had cost me around 3,000 guilders estimated. This paper treasure, which was estimated at 20 or 30,000 guilders, I had offered to the court of Madrid and sold for 10,000 guilders and a present worthy of a king. That is to say, he sold the atlas for 10,000 guilders and, part of the price, a present worthy of a king. So he was to receive two things, 10,000 guilders and a present. That is why they were deposited and sealed at His Majesty's ambassador in The Hague until the money in the present, which I hoped would surpass the treasure in value, would be received, but the ambassador sent the work without my knowledge overseas to Spain. The ship was hijacked, and these maps were thrown into the sea. For me, having only a few copies left, I could get no higher payment than 8,000 guilders. And he wrote this letter in 1692 in Amsterdam. So Whitson is valuing this atlas at 20 to 30,000 guilders. And what he managed to negotiate was 10,000 guilders together with a gift that he thought would be equal in value to about 10,000 guilders. So in Whitson's mind, he had negotiated a price of about 20,000 guilders for this atlas, and he was selling it specifically as a guide to finding shipwrecks so that treasure could be recovered from them. That is to say, Whitson recognized this new purpose of Hack's later atlases. As I said, Whitson valued the atlas at 20 to 30,000 guilders and had arranged to get approximately that amount, that is to say about 20,000 guilders, from the Spanish court. He ended up selling part of the atlas for 8,000 guilders, so just to keep these numbers in mind. For comparison, the Huntington Library Hack Atlas has tipped into it a letter from William Hill of the South Sea Company dated December 3, 1711, in which he says that in 1693, he had bought the atlas directly from William Hack for £70. Georg Heinrich Paritius, in his Cambio Mercatorio of 1709, says that £9 is equivalent to 100 Dutch guilders. So the £70 for which the Hack Atlas was sold in 1693 is the equivalent of 778 guilders. Thus, one of Hack's atlases was worth about 25 times as much when it was marketed as a guide to finding shipwrecks as it was when it was sold as a beautiful and detailed guide to sailing the western coast of the Americas. So some other atlas prices for comparison. In 1661, Duke Christian I of Mecklenburg paid 750 guilders for the Rostock Giant Atlas, which is 1.6 meters high, so a truly huge and spectacular object. And he paid 750 guilders for it, much, much less than the 20,000 guilders that Whitson had negotiated for his Hack Atlas that had indications of treasure in it. In 1681, the Blau brothers sold copies of their 2-volume Atlas of Savoy to Duke Vittorio Amadeo II for 578 guilders each. So again, much, much less than the 20,000 guilder figure. And Claude de Mesme, Comte d'Avaux, offered 20,000 guilders for the spectacular Atlas Blau van der Hem, which was in 46 folio volumes and contained many, many manuscript maps. So a truly spectacular object. And again, huge and in 46 volumes. So very different from this one volume hack atlas. So again, this indicates the extraordinary valuation that Whitson was able to place on the hack atlas because he recognized the value of the indications of shipwrecks and the treasures in them. So to conclude, one thing we can conclude is that the Huntington Library Hack Atlas, which is usually dated circa 1684, should be dated post 1687, the date of Phipps's shipwreck recovery, since it includes information about the treasure on shipwrecks. And the fact that it was sold by Hack himself in 1692 tends to confirm a later date for it. Similarly, the undated atlas in the Bancroft Library, which contains information about treasure on shipwrecks, should be dated after 1687. The information about the treasure on shipwrecks is a very small percentage of the information in Hack's atlases, but represents a remarkable, again, repurposing or additional purposing of the atlases, vastly increasing, as we've seen, their potential value. It's frankly amazing that at almost the same time that Hack himself, who should have appreciated their value better than anyone, sold one of his atlases that contains information about treasure for the equivalent of 778 guilders. At that same time, Nicholas Whitson was negotiating to sell another of Hack's atlases for 20,000 guilders, or about 25 times more. Whitson saw the information about treasure in the Hack Atlas, immediately understood its value, and found a buyer who understood it too, namely the King of Spain, to whom the treasure in the ships had originally belonged. Whitson understood the value of and market for Hack's work much better than Hack himself did. And finally, a little bit of bookending of our story. So Hack's atlases took their origin from a Spanish derrotero that was almost thrown overboard from the Rosario, and Whitson's Hack atlas was thrown overboard on its way to be sold to the Spanish crown. So a curious coincidence. Thank you very much.
That was great. Thank you. I have a question for you as well. In looking at some of the early Spanish maps and sort of age of exploration, there was a sort of a chart I came across that showed the number of ships sailing from Spain to the New World and the number returning. And it looked like about 27% of all of the recorded ships during this period of time went missing, or they didn't come back. So I presume they had sunk or were lost at sea. Have you seen in your studies any kind of compilation of sort of the known shipwrecks or where they may be?
There are such books. There are a couple, and I'd be delighted to. I don't have the titles in mind right now, but I encountered them during my research, and I'd be delighted to send you the references.
I would love that. And in your research, I know you have a number of maps from the Museo Naval in Spain, and also the Morgan Library. Are you able to get those online, or do you have to request those images, or how do you come across some of those manuscript images?
So the Morgan Library, those images are not online. I visited the library and took the photos myself some years ago. The derrotero at the National Library of Spain is online. The one at the Naval Museum is not online, and I had to order those images.
Got it. And I'll just one last comment for those of you that have interest in this area. There's a Spanish author, Arturo Pérez Reverte, and he's written a book called The Nautical Chart, and it's about essentially a sunken ship and efforts to find it using old atlases and stuff. So for those of us that like maps and treasure and exploration, it's a great piece of history. It's fictional, but it has trips to the the museums and the auction houses and all that. So you might find that as an interesting read this summer.
Great.
Could you post the title and author in chat, please?
It will take me a little while to find it, but I'll be happy to send it to Steve via email. And so if you write Steve an email, perhaps he can share it with you.
Great. I'll for sure do that. And other questions? I'm looking at the chat here. I don't see anything in the chat, but
can I ask one verbally?
Sure.
And sorry, my camera's off for very good reasons. I was wondering what indication do you have about where Hack got the information about where and when Hack got the information about what was on the ships? I mean, he added it later. Where did it come from?
Yes, so that's something I continue to work on. So I've been able to find the source for the information about the treasure, I believe definitely on one and perhaps on two of the shipwrecks. And they were in published works. And I've searched for the source of information about the treasure on the other ships, and I thus far have not found the source he used. It's of course very possible that he was using manuscript sources that no longer survive, but I will continue searching.
Chet, this is Tom Paper. What are you thinking about or working on these days? What's your your energies?
My main task lately has been my book about cartouches, cartographic cartouches, and it has been a tremendous amount of fun, and it's an unending source of amazement to me that there is no book about cartouches on the one hand, but on the other hand, the subject just goes on and on and on and on forever. The number of cartouches is just staggering. And so on the one hand, it's kind of amazing that there is no book about cartouches, but on the other hand, I kind of understand because it's just so much to take on. But so that's what I've been working on a fair bit recently. And I've also been working on an article about cartouches that have a lot of colonialist imagery. So I just was finishing up a draft of that article.
And Chet, it's probably unfair, but do you have a couple of favorite cartouches you could suggest or highlight?
Wow, I do. Well, perhaps I should say that I've established an Instagram account, and I've been putting some cartouche.
All right.
I've been putting some cartouche material on Instagram, so and typically they're not just images of cartouches. They're carousels, as Instagram calls them, which are sort of like mini PowerPoints, 10-slide PowerPoints. So I've done several carousels about cartouches, and then I've also done some videos of cartouches that go through the sources of cartouches, relationships between maps that have related cartouches, and so forth. So that's sort of the most efficient way to answer that question is have a look at my Instagram page and some of the cartouches there.
Chet, is that Map Legends?
That's right.
And Chet, just to pick up on your comment about the colonial imagery in cartouches, and I'm not sure if this is related, is your colonial imagery, can you describe it a little bit for me?
Yeah, so what I mean is imagery where the power of the colonial empire versus the colonized peoples is on prominent display. And in a way, it's often sickening to us. It's sickening imagery, but it's nonetheless important to try and analyze and understand.
Yeah, the reason I ask is on we've had a number of speakers recently, one from the Decolonialization Project, another which was I can't remember, about the DeVries atlases, and I try to boost them on Facebook, but they were actually rejected because of objectionable content. And I think it was probably some of the imagery around either native indigenous people or things of that nature, maybe even nudity in the drawings of indigenous people. So it's kind of an interesting kind of time we're in right now.
Yes. Huh. That's good to know. Any other questions? I'd be delighted to answer them.
Oh, Chet, can you hear me? So I was on mute.
I can.
I enjoyed the value aspect. How were you able to research the real cost of these atlases, and in comparison to say what would someone, how much money would someone have in a typical 17th century year? Like was it, how lavishly expensive were they in terms of our dollars today?
Yeah, so what I tried to do was keep it all in terms of contemporary guilders, rather than converting it to converting the figures to, US dollars or anything like that. Just because it's notoriously difficult to do that in a really satisfactory way, and there are various methods one can use to try and get at that. So, as you suggested, look at the typical wages of someone doing manual labor then and now. So I haven't tried to make that conversion yet, partly because I did play around with that at the very start of the project, and I did the conversion using two different systems, and the results were completely different. It's
hard to imagine the value of money, but I think the quantity of the treasure speaks for itself. I was just interested in the production of the atlas and what the map maker expects to get. It's an interesting part of society that we don't even know about anymore. Back then, what was the true cost of these things?
Of the atlases, yes.
Yeah.
And it's also, and I don't have an answer to this, but it's interesting to speculate about how Hack tried to market his revised atlas that had this information about treasure. What did he say to people, and why did he not put some text in the front that says, by the way, if you go through this carefully, or here's the list of the maps that have information about treasure wrecks. It seems like that would have helped him make the case, the value case, which is something that amazingly Whitson was able to do so much better than him.
Yeah, it's true. A lot of people come into my gallery, my map gallery, and they ask for treasure maps. Do I have any treasure maps? And I always say, well, if I had treasure maps, I wouldn't be here in the gallery. I would go and get the treasure. So it's just one of those things that who doesn't want a treasure map?
That's right.
Is there any evidence of any of this treasure having been recovered? I mean, is this information verified?
Yes. So at least one of the wrecks has been recovered, and I'm not remembering which one. I have it in my notes, but at least one of them has.
The Atosha.
That one is not on this list, but yeah. I don't have all the details in mind, but one of them has been recovered.
Chet, in your book about cartouches, are you going to include wind roses, or is that another book?
Great question.
That's another project. It's distinct from cartouches, and so another project either for me or for someone else.
That reminds me of this book that I keep close to me, and I've been meaning to reread it. These are all right. They're all symbols and fascinating to me.
Great.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Well, seeing no other questions, I think we're about a little bit. Well, we're kind of at time, but maybe not at time. But we're happy you're able to join us today. I will give a plug, and Chet, you may want to talk about some of the courses you've got coming up in the fall on Renaissance cartography. Do you want to give a little plug for that?
Well, that's very kind of you, Steve. So I've taught and will be teaching a short course through Stanford Continuing Studies, which is an introduction to medieval and Renaissance maps. And the format will be 4 2-hour sessions, one a week, so for 4 weeks. And I like to imagine it's pretty engaging. So I go through the 3 main types of medieval maps. So Mappamundi, Portolan charts, and the maps in Ptolemy's geography. I go through the reception of Ptolemy's geography in the Renaissance. I take a close look at a spectacular manuscript with a great variety of Mappamundi from the late 15th century. I take a close look at Martin Waldseemüller's Carta Marina. One of the segments is about the decoration of maps, so sea monsters, images of ships, and cartouches. And in one of the sessions, I talk about what can be gained by looking at maps slowly. So maps are very rich documents, and they contain information that can really only be gained by studying them very closely. And I show some examples of that type of information, and then offer some hints for how to look at maps slowly. So,
Matt, Tom, that sounds like a plug for the digital gallery and the Zooming. You want to talk about that for 1 second, Tom?
Sure. I've started a website called the Digital Gallery where we host maps and images and stories about them, and take high-res images and allow people to zoom in on them and sort of consume large amounts of information and the stories that have been curated around them fairly expeditiously. And actually, I have one of Chet's talks and the Carta Marina on the Digital Gallery. If you Google Carta Marina or Chet Van Duzer, you'll find an exhibit that's dedicated to that talk. I took the Carta Marina is in like 20 different images on the Library of Congress, and so I put them all together and they're available, so you can explore that slowly, right? As you're saying, Chet.
Great.
You can explore it slowly. Yeah.
Well, lovely. Thank you, Tom. I'm glad you're able to kind of give some context there. Any other questions before we close the meeting? Seeing none, I'd like to thank you all for coming today. Look at our, as Andrew mentioned, our website's under construction. I'm trying to get that wrapped up in the probably next month or so. But you can check our Facebook page for any upcoming meetings. And obviously members are notified of upcoming meetings via email through Andrew. So keep an eye out. Also keep an eye out on John Doctor's calendar of cartographic events for upcoming meetings. I think there's a meeting on Monday, which is a combined meeting for all the societies this coming Monday. I actually just saw it. I saw it yesterday, so I can't remember exactly what the content is, but have a look at that, and we'll see you guys soon.
Great. Well, thank you so much for organizing.
Yeah, thank you so much. Good weekend. Bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Chet.
Thanks, Steve.
Hey,
Take care.
Send me that the shipwreck book or that whatever. I'm curious about that. I may want to dig into this a little more with some of my Spanish map research.
Okay, sounds good.
All right.
Okay, take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
What a day, Steve.
Day of maps. All right. Let me pause the recording here if I can do that. There, okay. Now it's got to, there you go. It's got to do its little conversion.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Well, hey, how did your meetings go?
I thought they went well. We had 85 or so, and good questions. Courtney's amazing. I don't know if you heard her talk.
No, I saw the Napoleon presentation was good. I was multitasking a bit while I was on there because I was trying to get ready for this and also finishing up my taxes. I discovered that I've been paying improperly city taxes to Yonkers for the last 2 years.
Oh.
It's like $30,000.
Does that mean you owe more or less?
I mean, well, I overpaid. I paid.
Yeah.
When I moved up here, they were charged. My accountant was like assuming I owe taxes in Yonkers, which I don't. Anyway,
I'm getting the high sign, Steve.
All right.
I gotta go get a burritos with Eleanor.
all right.
Have a good weekend, Steve.
You too. Hi.
All right, see ya. Bye.